Hello, my name is Sabrina Schembri, and today I'm going to be discussing mechanical fastenings. I'm going to talk about riveting, bolting, and welded studs. So, mechanical fastenings are used to connect metal to metal or metal to other parts of a building. And you can have either permanent mechanical fastenings or semi-permanent mechanical fastenings. So permanent mechanical fastenings include things like welded fastenings and rivets, and these types of fastenings can only be removed through destruction, whereas with semi-permanent fastenings, you can remove them without damage of, the components. Semi-permanent fastenings include screws, bolts, and nails. Bolting and welding are the most commonly used for structural components, whereas riveting isn't really widely used for this and is used for other purposes. So I'm going to start off by discussing riveting. And riveting in structural steel actually differs from riveting in aluminum, have different purposes and different ways of installing them. So riveting in structural steel involves connecting the components with a rivet, and the rivet is basically like a shank, which is like a steel bar, and then at the bottom there's a tail, and at the top there's the head, and the head and the tail are made of steel of similar strength to the shank. And the rivets are then inserted through the holes in the components to join them. And there's different types of rivets that you can use, including hot driven rivets, which shrink slightly in diameter as a result of the heat of the process that it takes to install them. There are also shop rivets that are installed in the shop, field rivets, cold driven rivets, etc. So the process of riveting in aluminum, is different, and this is a permanent fastening method. In this case, the rivet is inserted in the hole and then deformed so that there's a head formed on each side of the work. And the purpose of aluminum rivets is to make aluminum appear neater. So next I'm going to discuss bolting. Bolting is a type of semi-permanent mechanical fastening, and you use nuts, bolts, and washers for bolting. So bolting is easier to do in the field than welding because the weather conditions can affect your welding, and this is just an easier method to use. When you're working with something that has movement or rotational forces that are also going to be occurring, it's better to use welded joints, but you can use bolts to hold joints together for welding. So the bolts have to be tightened a certain amount, and this can be done by either turning the bolt a certain amount of times, or you can use a power tool that'll tighten the bolt, and then the end will break off when it's as tight as it needs to be to avoid over tightening. The reason you need to ensure that the bolts are tightened properly is because if they're over tightened, it can create friction, and if they're too loose, it's not going to join the components together properly. So nuts and bolts come in different sizes that range up to 4 inches in diameter. And just like with rivets, they have heads. And the heads can be square, round, hexagonal. It depends on the situation that you're using them in. But most bolts have square heads. That's pretty standard, and so do nuts. And that way you can use a regular wrench to install them. There are also different strengths for bolts. You can get them made out of different alloys depending on the level of strength that you're going to be needing. So lastly, I'm going to talk about welded studs. Studs are basically just like steel rods. They can be straight or have like a bent end at like a 90-degree angle or any different angle to the straight side. And you can also get like round or rectangular eye bolts, that's what they're called, or you can get J bolts. You can get different studs based on what your project is, and you can install these studs either externally or internally. And installing studs is a semi-permanent method of fastening, and it's usually used when you're connecting non-structural materials to steel. So for example, like when you're doing architectural finishes to structural framework, that's when you'd want to use welded studs. And the plain end of a stud is welded by a unit to a steel component. And then once it's there, the supported item is installed over the stud and a nut is applied to the threaded end of the stud. So, yeah. In summary, I talked about some different types of mechanical fastenings, like semi-permanent ones and permanent ones, and I talked about riveting, bolting, and the use of welded studs. So thank you for watching.